We'd like to thank Swamiji Maharaj for introducing us to the Vivekananda Study Circle this year at IIT Madras. And as a topic given to us is about looking at our Rama, historical Rama, from an archaeoastronomy perspective. Over the last couple of months, with the coming of the completion of the Supreme Court case on the subject of Ram Janmabhoomi, which has been in the courts for more than a century, and now with the Bhumi Pujan, the subject of Rama and historicity of Rama has come into the topic of discussion with the youth and everybody in this land.
Also a celebration along with discussion.
So now let's look at the perspective of what historical Rama is all about over the next probably an hour or so. And we'll be at the end of the session, we'll be happy to take your questions on the subject, as in which you can keep on posting. We'll share the screen with you now of some slides that we have made. This is part of our presentation, which is part of our book and film on historical Rama and looking at Rama from multiple perspectives. We all know about Rama, one of the Maryada Purushottam of this land. A king, yes, a noble person, a divinity, a god, and all this, and lot more. And in this land of Tamil, we have had about a couple of centuries back, Saint Tyagaraja singing numerous songs on Sri Rama. And there have been many people all over the land singing about Rama, eulogizing through times. But for that, the fundamental question that you need to ask is, did Rama really exist for?
We always say, divinity is a matter. We've seen Rama as both a divine person. We also say that he was a king, a Maryada Purushottam, meaning a form who was an epitome of all Maryada. So then that means, did he really exist? We have divinity, and one side we have existence or historicity. So while divinity is a matter of faith, it can be a matter of faith, it's a matter of existence. And how do you prove the existence of Rama having walked this earth? Now that is a challenge for us, because this is something that has happened so many millennia ago, long that it is hard to put all the pieces together, given what our civilization has gone through also in all these millennia. And that is the challenge, and how do we overcome the challenge is what is going to be part of today's talk. And how can we surmount it and come to some understanding about this historicity? Now, Rama, in the Ramayana epic itself, if you see how he has been, his interactions and the conversations around, he has never declared himself to be a god. Unlike in the Mahabharata, where many a times Krishna did reveal his divine nature, Rama did not. He restrained himself from doing so. And it is much after his times that people have very openly started, while during his times, many of the sages and other people around him did deify him. People en masse afterwards, after his lifetime, have eulogized him, and which he really was divine. Because to understand this dichotomy between divinity and historicity, can they both straddle at the same time?
Can they intertwine is the key thing.
One also has to understand the overall thought of the civilization, which accepts that the supreme consciousness can be related to in various ways, 5 different ways, and one Avatara Purusha is one, Archaeo Murti. Today you have Rama both as a historical person, he is also the supreme consciousness who has descended as an avatara, and you also have a Vigraha Murti. So all of this are possible in our civilizational thought, and they exist parallelly across all these different planes. And that is what is fundamental to be able to understand the historic epics Ramayana and Mahabharata, which are the only 2 historical epics
Itihasa.
of the Itihasa of this land.
Which we'll come to that word later. First, we'll see this particular slide that's on screen now.
And
after the battle with, after Rama's battle with Ravana is over and he's victorious, Rama is victorious, Many people around there adore Rama as the divine incarnate, to which his response, Rama's response is, I am son of Dasratha. I'm a human. It's only time will tell who I am and where I came from. So he very clearly, he doesn't say no, he doesn't say yes. He leaves it open for time to decide. That's what he does. And where do we find all this? We find all this in the primarily and first in the text of Valmiki, which is Valmiki Ramayana, which is a historical biography by itself. This particular Ramayana is a historical biography where the first time this Valmiki Ramayana was recited was after the coronation, after the Pattabhishekam of Rama and Sita. That was the first time. And the length of shlokas, all this intrinsically mentioned within the text itself. So that makes it very intrinsic. And the first people to recite it in court in Ayodhya is his own twin sons, Lava and Kucha, to Rama. So that is the first step. So here is characters within the actual events of happening. They recite it to Rama, who listens to it and accepts it. So it is a first-hand report and a first-hand acceptance. That's what it is. And as she had said earlier, it's the word itihasa. We have only two itihasa in this land. And this word itihasa itself comes from a three-part word. Iti plus ha plus asa, meaning it thus happened. If you say, since you're in Madras, I'll say expression in the language of Tamil. Idu ippadi nigazhandhathu is what you can say in Tamil, since you're in Madras IIT. That is itihasa. So it is not an imaginary text. It's not a mythology. It's not a fictional text. It's something that happened. That's the very way it has been termed very clearly makes it historical. And only two itihasas in this land. In contrast, the text, if you say what is written by Goswami Tulsidas years back, it's not itihasa, it's a kavya, a mahakavya. Similarly, about 1.5 million ago, Kalidasa wrote Raghuvamsa, a beautiful poem in the Sanskrit language, again a kavya, a mahakavya. Similarly, coming down south, Kamban wrote about 1 millennia ago his kavyam called Ramayanam, Kamba Ramayanam to be more precise. That is again a kavya, that's not itihasa. All these three texts and 100 more all across the land, they are all not itihasa, they are only kavya. Why is that? Only Valmiki's Ramayana is itihasa. That's a key question that we need to understand.
And like we saw, that is because it was written during the times of Rama himself, when the events had just happened, and the people who had been part of the events were still around to corroborate, to authenticate it. That is why, and it was written by Valmiki himself and narrated by Lava Kucha and then authenticated by Rama, and Sita was always there to corroborate the stories and the events. So that makes it a historical narrative compared to many other things which we call history today. Today, actually what we refer to as history are accounts which have been put down much after the event, many centuries sometimes after the event, and they are based upon things that have been just strung together by different people across times and through various sources of information. Whereas actual history, if you really look at it, two world histories are these two epics, Itihasa, written by these two authors who call it by this name itself within the text. And why do they actually, see, why do we have this issue of accepting Ramayana or Mahabharata as a history text? It is because of how we understand history today. Today for us, history means it is a text which has chronology. It says this year this happened, this year this happened. We look for the continuity in chronology, and we look for the names of all those kings and what happened, who won which war. So that for us forms history. Whereas what formed history in earlier days was a recording for the purpose of keeping up values alive. That was what history was all about. We'll just show you a little bit, maybe we're just going a little away, but I think it's essential here to show why Itihasa is. So for us today, history, the very word history itself comes from the word historia, the most, if you call one of the ancient historical works, that is Historia, and that
comes from authored by a Greek person called Herodotus. About 500 BC, he wrote a book called Historia, from which we get the word history today.
And that, if you see, logs events from around 300 BCE to around 300 CE. Today we use the word BCE and CE rather than AD and BC. CE means Common Era. BCE is before Common Era. So this 300 AD would be 300 CE. This would be 300 BCE. And after 300 CE, if you see, the entire Europe went into a period of dark ages for about 1,000 years. There was no history documented. And again, it is from Renaissance that you see history being documented chronologically.
When she says Renaissance, again, she means for about CE onwards. So that is for an intervening period of 1,000 years, you hardly have any history at all. So the historiography of Europe is for 700 years, from 300 BC to 300 CE, that's about 600 to 700 years. And again from 1350 CE to 2020 CE. So you have two short periods of 700 years. Of course, I say 700 years a short period, because in contrast, in the land of Bharat, that is India, you have history going for thousands of years continuously without break. And because we have not, fortunately, India did not have dark ages. We had some other form of dark ages like plunder and loot. That's a different matter. So the historiography of India goes back by 5,000, 10,000 years and more. The history of India. So what is historiography itself changes. For them, it takes priority because it's a short period of time. So you have to speak about timelines. Whereas in a land of 10,000 years of more of history, chronology's importance drops. As she said, what is more important? The morals and behavior, the values that it takes precedence or chronology. So the historiography depends upon the timeline of history we have. That is the clear change in perspective, because we're looking at a European model imposed on India. We need to look at the Indian model that's needed for India, where there's only civilization, because the world has gone through at least about 30, 40, 50 civilizations. Different people have come up with different accounts of how many civilizations we have had in this world. But of all the civilizations, the only civilization that survived all this and come through continuously is the Indian civilization. So, and that's got a very long history. So the historiography has also got to be suitably fixed for it, namely having a where you don't give so much importance to the timeline as you give importance to the value system, because India is a value-based land.
When Valmiki starts documenting Ramayana, the life history of Rama, he actually starts it. I mean, the reason for him to even document it is he is wondering as to who could have been a human who had all the 16 possible qualities of a human that a human can ever exhibit in his behavior. Comes out as a conversation Ramayana itself, and he says, who is such a person? And Narada says, who, forget about who lived in the past, there is a person living out him. And Valmiki then, and he says that is, from there on, Valmiki starts documenting the life history of Rama. These different values that Rama had exhibited in his life at various instances of his life during all the trials and tribulations. So that is why it is also called Ramayana, the journey of Rama.
Because in each of these 16 qualities which he just now mentioned, what is important is what? Each quality to bring out. It is not just to list out qualities. It's not a listing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. No, it is to say in what context, what are the challenges you faced in the context, and how you actually exhibited those qualities in that context. That is why the story of Ramayana is a canvas to showcase this whole events and how a real live historical person was able to exhibit the 16 qualities that a man can endeavor to exhibit on ever, and how he exhibited them in live situations. So that is why the story. So you have the Ramayana as a canvas time, and Valmiki documenting it for us to highlight these points. So what we learn from Ramayana is how we can all yearn to live for these qualities that there is to it.
In fact, these are the qualities that Rama exhibited.
This is in the article that we have compiled recently for the magazine of the Ashram, Ramakrishna Ashram's magazine. So that will be coming out shortly, giving you the 16 qualities that he has.
So which he exhibited at various instances. So now coming to the challenge, see, when you say therefore now historicity, first we have a boogie about accepting Rama as a historical personage. And because the narrative around Rama is not fitting into the way history is recorded. Now this is where we see why fundamentally it doesn't match that. Then comes the boogie about associating. Now, if you say something is historical, that means it happened in a particular place and a particular geography. So the history goes automatically associated with a geography as well. So which is that geography? That is another thing that we really have to see. So we have to see from various perspectives to ratify the history of something that has happened so long ago. We find there are many records. So right from the family tree that corroborates. So yeah.
You have here a family tree of Rama going back 30, 40, 50 generations prior to him and 30, 40, 50 generations after him. If suppose Rama is a mythical person, you cannot have a family tree either way, 40, 50 generations before him and 40, 50 generations after him. That is the key point. Look at this. Starting from Kashyapa and Aditi, then coming on to the Vivaswa, the Manu, then the Prithu, then Ikshwaku. Look at that. Each name and Prithu from Prithvi and all of them, okay? And each of them, they map correctly with the Puranic legends of those times, which cross-verify and cross-map. That's the beauty of it. That's what brings out the authenticity.
So when Valmiki writes the Itihasa Ramayana, he focuses on Ramayana, and he does give this lineage of Ramayana, Rama. But at the same time, there are so many other legends, other literary evidences which corroborate what Valmiki is saying in terms of the kings, their achievements, and so on and so forth. And so you see that very intricate mesh across all these various legends and the persons and their achievements and also the geography. So if one legend says something about a geography and it indicates a movement to some other land and it continues from that land, so the literary wise you find a big spread. So while we say Valmiki did write the Itihasa, this Itihasa itself finds corroboration across the various Puranic legend, and they show that they are not just imaginary names. Each of them is associated, has been corroborated across so many other texts. So we saw so many above Rama, and there are so many below Rama as well.
See, before Rama, there's Dasharatha, then Aja, then Raghu. That's why you have the name Raghu, Raghupati, Raghunanda, all those things. So then you got Lavakusha, their children, their children's children. Then you got Nala. So many of them, so many names that we get to hear. And finally, when you see one of the much later descendants, 2 millennia later, a person named Brihad Bala, he also took part in the next Itihasa of the land, which is Mahabharata, in the Kurukshetra war. And he fought on the side of the Kauravas. And actually, he was killed by Abhimanyu in the Chakravyuha. So look at this. So one legend meeting into the other legend so beautifully across 2 millennia and more. So that's why you see how it spans across time very well.
So again, you find corroborations in Mahabharata. We won't get into too much of these details. Many of these, they're all there in our book, Historical Rama. But the point here is we are showing you that while there is one fundamental text called Itihasa, which means itself its history, there are a lot of corroborations which are coming from those times before it, as well as times much after it. It continues, the corroborations continue to show that it is history. And along with history, you know that it has to go with a geography because it is something that has happened and it has happened on this earth and this land. Therefore, what is the geography which is associated with this history? Are there corroborative evidences from geography? So that again, you do find that every place that has been indicated in the Ramayana, you find all those places root in the same locations as described verbally in the text. So what you find verbally described in the text, you find it in the same logical positioning, geographical flow in the land, or in the map of the land itself.
And that's what you said here. There's a clear convergence of literature, archaeology, and local traditions. And these local traditions, let's recall, has come down to us over 7,000 years and more, continuously, and sort of meshed in the tradition of the land beautifully. Unless nobody can go and implant a mythology over 100, 200 years in every village,
in
every town.
For instance, just take Kishkinda, which comes much later in his exile, during his exile. Vanavasa. It comes much later on his way to finding Sita. Now, if this Kishkinda, such a Kishkinda existed somewhere here up north, if, for example, Rameshwaram were some places in the direction of travel and going by the same names and going by millennia old legends, local legends, which confirm that actually which celebrate that particular event having taken place in that same, in their land itself. And which is why it very clearly corroborates the history that you find in the literature. They both go hand in hand. It's not just in India, you also find the same in Sri Lanka as well. Today, Sri Lanka.
Yeah, so if you find about 500 places in India which corroborate with the events of Ramayana in the mainland of India, in the island of Lanka, you have about 50 places which corroborate very well. And we had the good opportunity, good fortune of more than a decade ago to go to Lanka many times at the invitation of the Sri Lankan government to sort of document all these places. It's been documented many times over the last many centuries. We had an opportunity to sort of correlate again once again for these decades and bring it out in the form of a book called Ramayana in Lanka, because 1/3 of the events of Ramayana happen in Lanka. So we're able to bring it all down and then show this in our book called Ramayana in Lanka. That's again there for a read for all of you. So there are about 50 locations at least in Lanka which collect very well with all these events. And for example, just take one event for you. See, Vibhishana's palace is there very near Colombo, because this is the palace of Vibhishana. That's me standing there along with the local scholars and all those things. It's a very clear palace, and you look at the back, this is the inside. Because now it's a Buddhist shrine. Earlier it was a Vibhishana shrine. The Vibhishana shrine is there. And look at this very clearly in the back of it, we're discussing there. Here you see, here Lakshmana doing the coronation Pattabhisheka of Vibhishana after Ravana is vanquished. Okay, like that, every panel describes so much in detail about. So here is a Vibhishana temple there inside. So like that, for multiple angles, and this is the, if you see the later one constructed few centuries ago, there's one more here constructed many centuries ago before that, much before the colonial powers came to this land. So this is same things again there. So from multiple perspectives in all the lands, you can get to see this. So that is the beauty of it. Now let's look at one more subject.
So what happens now for history to accept Rama's historicity? You have literature, you have literary evidence, you have the geography. But then what is the stumbling block again? The stumbling block for our generation, our present minds, is to be able to map it to a time frame and, if possible, a particular date itself. Because unless I say I was born on DDMMYYYY, I am not a person. I am not historic. So what is that DDMMYYYY for Sri Ramchandra? So unless you give me that, I will not accept his historicity, will be the mindset of today's generation. And therefore, now, did Rama really have a DDMMYYY as Valmiki would have said? Yes, he did. But not necessarily as the way we understand it in the form of January, February, March. What was the kind of way of timekeeping of those times, which actually, if you see, was on a much more cosmic scale as compared to the 12-hour limitation that our clocks give us today? We do find such a description in the Ramayana. Now, the challenge is for us to bridge it from there to our present understanding. And that we can achieve through something called an archaeo-astronomical approach. So today, if you see...
See, in archaeology, we dig into the ground. Astronomy is in the sky. So what we are trying to do is we're trying to merge the two or sort of interlink the two. Archaic is old. That's why we get archaic, archaeo. And now we have softwares today which can help us know what about the star movements and the planet movements. So using this, and this software now can go in the front or in the back, both ways, by many thousand years.
That is forward in time or backward in the past.
So using this opportunity that the software allows you to go backward in time also, the new field has come up now. It's called archaeoastronomy. Earlier also it was done, but it was all done manually. So it was a very laborious process where a person took a lifetime to do all these, calculate all these things manually. Now with the software, it's all possible to do it in a much, much shorter, easier frame of mind. And the way we have a clock, and we're able to keep time nowadays and know what's time and how do you actually keep time?
So today we only have a dial which has 12 units and 3 hands, the hour, minute, and second. So after 12 hours, it gets reset, the count gets reset, and you need another external reference to be able to tell you whether it is morning or whether it is evening, right? So this is the limitation of this particular clock that we use today.
Even though this clock has got 12 units and 3 hands, it's got a limitation of only 12 hours.
Whereas the ancient Indian timekeeping used the sky itself as its clock. So the entire sky was like the dial. There were 27 units. So instead of 12 units, you had 27, and you had 7 hands. So the sun, the moon, and the 5 planets.
5 visible planets. These are the 5 visible planets. So you had this.
So you had the 12 units, and you had 27 units, 12 hands. And on these hands, you had the 5 visible planets and the sun and the moon. So with this, you could specify time very distinctly, very uniquely across large spans, not just limited by 12 hours or 1 day. So because the combinations of these can be very different. When the sun is in one, the earth can go through so many. So, I mean, all of you are engineering students, so you would know permutations and combinations and the numbers that are possible with this kind of a set of numbers. So what did they do? Their way of keeping time was to look at the sky and say such and such a thing, such and such a planet is in this position. So amongst the 12 zodiacs units which are there, this particular planet is in this zodiac, this is in this zodiac. Each star, the 27 stars, were markers. See, look at the word nakshatra that was used. Naksha means map. We all know that. So these stars were like the map in the sky. Because if you didn't have this, if you were just 2 bodies, okay, just earth and sun, if I keep looking at the sun, we know wherever we go, the sun, wherever we stand, we can still look at the sun, we can still look at the moon, and we feel they're following us. You are not able to get any reference point. You need a third point, a third marker, which can act as a reference. And the Indian concept of timekeeping is very vast. We can talk on it for hours. We've got a huge, beautiful capsule on understanding how they kept time at such large scales. And these nakshatra were those maps. They were the pointers in the sky. They acted like map points for you to be able to understand where you are. That is a fundamental thing. It actually shows that the ancient Indian thought was very much heliocentric and not geocentric, even though they were describing it from a geocentric perspective. Even though they said the sun is traveling like this, the moon is traveling across these 12 zodiacs, they knew very well that it is heliocentric, which is why they use these stars as markers to map the path of the earth around the sun. And so what they did was various events of the Ramayana, some of the significant events, they have mentioned the positions of the sun, the moon, and the 5 visible planets. Now, because today we are I mean, even in those days, they did have accurate information about the speed of these planets, which is what actually gave rise to the concept of weekdays also. They knew the speeds of backwards and say that if the Earth was here, I mean, if the moon was here and this planet was here, it would have been so many years ago. So you work backwards using the positions and you trace and you try to locate the Gregorian calendar date on which this event would have happened. So while our ancestors, while Valmiki had left the detail in the form of the imprint or footprint of these planets, celestial bodies in the sky, today we can use those details to calculate it in the Gregorian date format. And starting with Rama Navami, his birth, the birthday of
That is the Navami Tithi. There's a moon phase in which Paksha, Shukla Paksha or Krishna Paksha. Shukla means the whitening phase, Krishna Paksha is a darkening phase. Here it's in the whitening phase, of which meant Chaitra Masa. So like that, it says the whole detail is there, which nakshatra is where is the Sun, Mars, Saturn, all that is available, where they are, then Aries, and all this is mentioned. So very clearly you get this in a particular verse in Ramayana as to what it is, So since it will be slightly difficult to understand this verse, what we've done is we have made it easy for all of us to understand. Same verse, we put it down like this. We know where the Sun is, we know where Saturn is, we know where Jupiter is, we know where Venus is, and Mars, and all those things. We know it is a Navami Tithi, and where Moon is also, we know which constellation. It's near the Polak star in the Gemini constellation. We know what Cancer, what is rising in the east at that particular time. All this we know very well. And once you know all these things, you can map it in a software, which is known as a Tantrum software.
Earlier, there have been many people. See, this act of trying to map it to a Gregorian date has been happening ever since the history of India was dubbed as mythology by the colonials who came to India, especially the British. In fact, what has happened is, before we go here, fundamentally for the colonials coming to India around 1600s, 1700s, they were coming with a baggage in their mind of a date of creation of the universe, of the world. And that was fixed by the church then, by one of the fathers, Reverend James Usher
of Ireland.
Ireland. It had been fixed as 23rd October 4004 BC. So he was the Archbishop of Ireland, that is Reverend James Usher. So in 1664 AD, that is CE, he had proclaimed that the date of creation was 23rd October 4004 BC, and he had even given a time 9 a.m. And it was a declaration that was published then by the church itself.
So when you say it's a declaration that was published, and he called anybody who does anything and this was of the Christ and the Vatican Catholic faith, and then he said it was delivered in a sermon on souls. This actual copy
proclamation.
Of proclamation. What it says is anybody who opposes anything in this is a heretic. And what can happen to a heretic? A heretic is fit to be burnt on the stake. So this was nailed as a fact. And so this has happened in the Vatican and then happened in Ireland and became accepted all over that this was official day.
So even
why was it 23rd October and not 22nd October? We don't know. Why was it 9 a.m. and not 6 a.m. in the morning? We do not know. All these things, so they've been so precise. On what basis? There's no scientific explanation at all. But because of this, when the colonials came to India and
even though science was developing and Renaissance was happening, when they came to India, the scientists also, the science community had to adhere to this thought, this ceiling.
They had to accept this as when the earth itself was created. And in India, you have historical events happening of Rama and Krishna and others being born before earth was created, as per an Irish scholar's view. So how can it happen in India is a big question mark. So what did they do? They dubbed everything in India as mythology because all the stories that we see in India is before earth was created by God on 23rd October 4004 BC at 9 a.m. So now, so you cannot have events happening in India historically before when Earth came into existence. So that was the dilemma that they faced. So they imposed an idea, a colonial idea on India, and said, oh, summarily they dismissed everything in India as mythological. Now the point is, the colonists are gone, but that mindset they left with us is still not left our minds as yet. So, and we all know that this is absolutely unscientific. So we have to remove this thought from our mind and look at the Indian timeline from an Indic perspective. That is what is important. And with the data available, which can be scientifically corroborated. Now, going back to the subject of historical Rama.
So in 1800s, when they wrote a history of India and they dubbed everything mythology.
So there's somebody called James Mill and Charles Grant who were asked to write the history of India. Okay. And they were asked to write the history of India. It was appointed by the British Board of East India Company because they felt that Indians can have that very antique, very ancient perspectives of all these things, and it will create inferiority complex among the British officers in India. So they wanted to change the history of India. So they appointed two people, James Mill and Charles Grant, in 1808 to rewrite the history of India. And you know what they say when they rewrote the history of India for Indian administrators, that is for all the IAS officers and all the historians of India. They say very clearly in their text, the history of India, which they wrote, then, and they say and which became part of the parliamentary papers for them. It is included in all the syllabus for all their colleges. And all the officers are trained in this history of India before they came to India, because they had to be mentally oriented and they had to be told everything in India was inferior to the British. And it was a 12-year effort of writing. And they said nothing in India of the past is to be proud of. And every Hindu thought is trash. Sanskrit is no language at all. It's a very artificial language created. And it was actually created by one to lord over the other. See how they very clearly wanted to poison your mind. And this is the most important thing. They write in the preface and they declare it with pride actually that they wrote the history of India consciously without learning any Indian language, without ever visiting India at all. So they were sitting in England writing the history of India for the next few centuries to come without learning any Indian language and without even visiting India. So they concocted their own story of India. And that became the policy. The colonial policy of education of India came out of these two people's writings. In contrast, if you see, there was a person named Al-Biruni who came 800 years before James Mill and Charles Grant, who came with Muhammad of Muhammad of Ghazni, and he went through whole of India. Before that, there was another European by name Megasthenes who went across India and wrote the history of India. Those histories were never accepted because they have a lot of points about India, which first-hand impression, what in Hindi you would call as Ankon Dekha Hal, that was not accepted. They took something written by James Mill and Charles Grant, and that unfortunately has clouded our minds over the last 200 years, written by people who had no knowledge of Indian language and who did not visit India at all. That's the sad part of it we have today.
So ever since such a history of India was written, there have been people to prove the historicity of Rama and Krishna. And there have been people who have used the same archaeoastronomy approach and who have culled out all this information from the Ramayana, but they have used manual methods. Now, what our generation today is fortunate enough is that there are these software which we can deploy today. So if you look at it, there have been step-by-step progress in approaching the historicity of Ramayana using astronomy itself, archaeoastronomy. So there have been people who have done this manual dating. There are softwares that help you date it today. So if you take all this information and use a software, that throws you a sky chart like this. So these are called the sky charts, which show you the position for any given date and a given time from a given location, how it would have looked. So plotting all that you can find in Ramayana regarding Rama's birth, you come to a conclusion. You come to a sky chart on 10th January 5114 BCE, which shows the positions of the planets as has been shown in the text. Likewise, now, as per the text, it says that Bharata was also born immediately after Rama. And if you look for the sky chart, if you look at the 16 hours after birth of Rama, you come to planetary positions which coincide with what is being described as for the birth of Bharata. So what you find in the text, you find it also corroborating on the sky chart as well.
Similarly, you have for Lakshmana Shatrugna, also the other twins, on 12th January. So you have this, it tallies very well. Similarly, let's go to the subject of the pre-coronation eve, the discussion among Dasaratha and all his courtiers as to there's a text being described as to what month it is. So we know what month was the pre-coronation eve of Rama, and there's a dialogue between. So the astrologers foretell Dasharatha that his signs, astrological signs, don't look good, and he must at least make Rama the Yuvaraja, not the Raja, but Yuvaraja, because of these. Now, it actually all this happened to the Dasharatha fell a few days later. But that aside, what this really tells us, we know now the star position, we know all the planetary positions now, and with this data, if we also know where the moon is, all this we know, which Pusha Nakshatra, all those things we know. So with this, we can now date that particular discussion day to 4th January 5089 BCE. And working back to when Rama was born as 5114 BCE to 5089 BCE, it is 25 years. So Rama is 25 years at the time that he goes to Vanavasa, the time of the pre-coronation eve. So that's what you get very clearly, you get that here. See, so it tallies internally to the sequence of events. That is the beauty of it. Similarly, it says very clearly what time. And later in the text, another 13 and a half years later, when Sita offers dana to Ravana, who comes as in disguise as a mendicant before being abducted, this mendicant asks Sita who she is, and she says who she is. See, so and so, so and so. And he says, at that time, my Lord Rama was 25 years of age. So this is in the Ramayana text here. So very clearly shows that the events internally collaborate. That's the key part of it. Then you come to the episode of the Kar-Dushan fight, where Kar and Dushan are Ravana's and Surpanaka's cousins who are in the Madhya Bharat forest. So that is where Surpanaka comes, and Surpanaka nose is cut by Lakshmana, and she goes and first complains to her cousin brothers who are nearby, and Kar and Dushan. So see, look at this. So there's a shloka in the Ramayana, very clearly it says that there's a solar eclipse being described very clearly. Although it is daytime, it started appearing to be evening. And the sun was covered by a dark colored disk that had red colored corners. Look at this. So you're talking about the sun was caught by Rahu, because of which the sun had lost its glow and brightness, and various animals and birds started making noises as if it was dusk. So you're talking about something happening in the afternoon. Now, and where is this? This is at Nasik. That's where the nose cut happened. Nasik. That's where the nose cut happened for you. So with all this, you are able to now list out what planet is where, and all this about the fight between Kar-Dushan and Rama Lakshmana. And it says Mars is in the middle of them. It's a little difficult to get Mars in the middle, because it's rare to get Mars in the middle. That rare thing happened that day. So because you don't see planets in the day sky. With this, we know what is the position. So it was an eclipse time then. And that's when Kar and Dushan, they tell Rama and Lakshmana, look here, I want to say about my prowess before the fight starts. But because it's sunset, then we cannot. So let me start fighting. So we know it's an eclipse, and it happened geographically at Panchavati at 3:10 in the afternoon. So this helps us place that this was Amavasya. Obviously, solar eclipse happened only on Amavasya. So you get to see the eclipse here very clearly. And the date, is 7th October 5077 BCE at 2 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. What does this tell you very clearly? This is the oldest recorded observation of eclipse that we have in India, which goes back 7,000 years. Similarly, within that same year, you have the Vali Vadam, okay, by Rama, when Vali fights Sugriva. So this is explained in so many ways, explained everywhere in all sculptures. This also is the eclipse that happens. It's also a solar eclipse that happens. This again in Amavasya, in the month of Ashada, but in the morning hours. So that happened in the afternoon, late afternoon. Here it's happening in the morning hours. So we get a date for this also now. So like this, you get a series of events. Similarly, you know about Hanuman's visit to Lanka.
We can go to the table.
So this again is an eclipse. So you can reach eclipses that happens. So in 1 year, you got 3 eclipses. So this is a lunar eclipse, but the lunar eclipse is where in Lanka, and it can happen only in the evening at sunset time. So here he shows again Sita's, Hanuman found Sita looking like a full moon, which is eclipsed by Rahu. So look at the text, very clearly speaks about that, the full moon and the eclipse in a very poetic form. So getting all this data together, you know when the eclipse occurred on 12th September 5076 BCE. But earlier two were a solar eclipse and this is a lunar eclipse. Like this, you get a sequence of events where you get to see all the eclipses happening. And with this, you can form a sky chart, the timeline. And the key point is all these dates should be internally consistent with the flow of events and the gap of each event. That is what you get here. You get the events, their flow, and the gap to each of them matching precisely. So what you get are internally consistent, scientifically checked, it's verifiable what Hema has done here and what before us another scholar in Delhi, Sri Pushkar Bhatnagar, is no more Swargiya. Like that, the same thing with the same planetarium software, using the similar data, the same data from the text of Ramayana culled out. You can also do the same and find out it scientifically verifiable by each one of us. So that gives it the high degree of scientific possibility.
See, in all of this, what you will find is the gap between the events, the list of events that you find here. If you read the Ramayana story, then these events, at what age of Rama it would have taken place, at what point of his exile it would have taken place. Now, if you trace the dates also, they will tally with the same elapsed time as described in the literature. Not only that, these events have they coincide with such a celestial event being seen from that same geographical location around the same time. For instance, if the solar eclipse during Khardushan episode, if you come across a solar eclipse, of course, you would not see during night, but if something like that, which is not corresponding with when the event should have taken place during the day, if you come across such inconsistencies, then it wouldn't hold good. But you find that consistently they're all sitting very well. And then that lends a corroboration from within the text, from literature to astronomy, and as well as geography. So all these three coincide and they reinforce that all what has been written down should have been a historical account itself, and it is something that is today dateable using our DDMMYYYY, so that we can be convinced, yes, that it was historical. This exercise of this archaeoastronomy is only needed to convince ourselves that today we can give a date as per the Gregorian calendar, not to confirm whether, as far as our ancestors were concerned, they have documented it in their times, or in their manners of timekeeping. They have written about the geography and they have also called it the history. So this, in a way,
so this very clearly gives you the data wherein you, like this, we have been able to give the timeline for whole of ancient India, starting from Rama 5114 BC, which is available in our book, and right from the times of Alexander.
When James Mill and Charles Grant wanted to dismiss everything as mythology, they said anything in India before Alexander's time is mythology, because everything else you cannot pin it to a particular time. So before this, everything was mythology. India was barbaric, and it is only the Greeks, when they visited India, they gave it some sense of, some semblance of civilization. So before that, nothing in India is dateable explicitly. That is what they say. But going through all the records of the life personages, we can today, especially being equipped with easier methods such as softwares, and also more data coming out from a little more easily accessible in present times, we can start dating each one of those people whose historicity and pegging the historicity has caused a lot of disruption in the defining the overall timeline of Indian history. And when you don't do this, you are not able to get an anchor point for even understanding the Indian civilization and its overall achievements. See, why is all these dates important? I mean, what does it matter whether Rama was born on 10th January or Krishna was born in needed for you to understand? Because on one side you say that we have so much of history, we have achieved so. If you want to leverage on that wisdom, on that knowledge, on that confidence, then you need to know that this is not a figment of imagination. There is an anchor point, and how far back does it go? Because on one side today, unfortunately, we eulogize the Indus Valley civilization. Was so great because we had drainage, we had architecture, we had engineering, we had trade, we had metallurgy, we had agriculture, we had so much, we had everything. This Indus Valley civilization to the Vedic literature, which was written on the same banks of the Saraswati River, which was the integral part of the civilization, which is also datable to around this period. Mahabharata was the time period when the Veda was last recompiled, and we find evidences of the Indus Valley civilization going to all these dates, 5000 BCE, 7000 BCE, and so on. And but we do not correlate both of them. We treat that as something separate, hanging somewhere. We treat this literature as hanging somewhere. And as a civilization today, we are rootless. We do not know our own identity. We do not relate with the Indus Valley, nor do we relate with this literature. It is when you club both of these and put them together and merge them together, and you understand and try to look at the overall timeline.
So for what she says, geography has to meet history. You can't have history hanging in the air and geography being on the ground. So you have a lot of sites in geography and you have history hanging. So the both have to meet. And when they meet only, you get the true perspective of the civilization of Bharata, the civilization of India, the literature of India, and it gets a bearing and it gets a gravitas. And it is for the educated youngsters of this new millennia, what you call millennials, for us to now take it forward and understand this civilization from this glory of its perspective. That's what it is.
Yes.
So this you can see. So Rama's influence over 7,000 years is across the world in many ways. All over the world you have, and he is not just. It's beyond hero. He is it's a civilization inspiration for not just India but all over the world. If you go to the east. If you go to Thailand, you have the kings of Thailand. Their official title is Rama 1 to Rama 9. The present king is Rama 10. That's the present king. Earlier king was his father, Rama 9. Similarly, if you go west to Egypt, what do you see? The kings of Egypt are called Ramses. Ramses is again a Greek word. It's not an Egyptian word. The original Egyptian word is Rama. So originally Ramasa, which the Greeks called it Ramses. So that's why it's a dynasty. The lineage of Ra. Ra comes from sun. So.
And furthermore, in our book, Ayodhya, War and Peace, actually we have shown how Rama, the imprints of Rama extended far and wide. You find a lot of it even in the Persian civilization. In many parts which today form part of Iraq, you find both physical evidences. You also find. We've detailed all this in the
book Ayodhya, War and Peace.
A lot of lovely images today we are able to see. These, unfortunately, they are quite recent, and there has not been an attempt to write a coherent world history. So India is largely left out in the narrative of world history, and you find the similarity.
She said that India is left out of world history because Indians themselves are not willing to look at the world history from the true global perspective. That is why we are being left out. When we ourselves at the first step start looking at it from our perspective with respect to our own knowledge system, then we can see how the thought of India has gone all over the world, right through from the Central Americas in the east to the Africas in the west and Europe in the west. So that is how we need to see it's all over. The lineage of Rama is spread all over the world. You can see even the Central Americas, they had a festival in those days called Ramasitwa. The Mayans had a festival because for them, how we went is eastwards. They went from the east coast, the Coromandel coast of India, through the Southeast Asia islands, to the Pacific Ocean, coming all the way eastwards up to the central coast of Americas. So it was the eastward journey. Similarly, from the west coast of India, from the Malabar Konkan coast, they went all the way up to here. So that is how we traveled all over the seas and spread the knowledge of India to different parts of
And
the
you
world.
find traces of Rama's lineage all the way even in Korea. So Koreans also relate to Rama, one of their princes, one of their queens.
Dynasty named after her, and millions of Kims are there in the world now. For them all, their what you call their festival, what you call their stala, with their holy place is Ayodhya. And there is a monument in Ayodhya on the banks of the Sarayu River for the Koreans, which they come and congregate every year and celebrate. Thousands and thousands of Koreans of the Kim dynasty come there. They come to celebrate that. Like that, you've got the spread of Rama all over the world. It is we Indians who got to recognize this. You go to Southeast Asia, it's full of Ramayana. So everywhere, so we need to this, celebrate this. All this we already brought out in our books. All this we have brought out very well in our set of books on Rama, which is available for all to see.
They are available on Kindle.
Books on Rama and 4 books on Krishna. So very clearly places Rama and Lakshmana, Bharata, Shatrughna, then Krishna, all as historical itihasa of this land. It's available for all to see. And not only that, we have made films on this now for all to watch. So the idea is we should all have confidence to be Indians in Indian ethos, in Indian ways, and dare to be.
We have to have confidence in our history. So then we have confidence in the literature those historical periods have produced, that this literature has got both science, spirituality, all of this intertwined, and they are for real. That will we dare to use it in present times in the way that we can. We have through the glass ceiling. So today, the glass ceiling that they had brought in 1600s of the 4004 BC being the date of creation, look at the kind of repercussion it has created on such a big civilization. Today, we are fighting and spending so much time just to understand and remove the baggage of myth, history, prove it as our history. Unfortunately, even till date, this historical, it has not been declared still a history of the land as to these are the kind of dates and so on. So until all this happens and until we get the dare, we will not be able to move forward and break further glass ceilings that today we can do if we can leverage some of our ancient texts.
And those who want, you can go to our web, BharathGyan.com, where all this data is available. Most of it is available for free read. And it's also there in our blog and our, we've got thousands of posts on Facebook and Twitter. On YouTube, we have made probably about 10, 12, 15 films on historical Ram and historical Krishna, different aspects, interviews. So it's most of it is available for free read. Only very few of them are available on Kindle. So please go ahead, enjoy, relish it, to understand this knowledge of the civilization from a scientific, logical, rational perspective with a sense of clarity, so that we can respect our land, understand the civilization of our land from our Indic perspective.
So with that, we'll be ready to take all your questions as much as we can within the time limit.